Do you even know the Miranda Rights?
You have the right to remain silent.
You have the right to remain silent.
You have the right to remain silent.
Legalese.
Bob,
Yes.
you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say or do can be used in a court of law against you. That's the Miranda warnings, or at least the beginning of them. And here to tell us more about them and where they came from is former Chief Justice of the Missouri Supreme Court, Mike Wolf.
Let me tell you about Miranda. The experts today have been talking about criminal law, about Miranda rights. You've heard of Miranda, of course, because it's been on TV. It's in movie crime shows. But where do Miranda rights come from? They come from a case decided by the United States Supreme Court. Actually, Miranda was the first of 4 cases that involved the same thing. The decision involved the question, well, what rights does a person have when he's questioned by the police? We know that we have a right not to incriminate ourselves, but when a police put us in custody and ask us questions, what rights do we have? Ernesto Miranda, let's talk about him. That's the guy who was in the case. He was a young guy who had been in trouble off and on since the 8th grade. In 1963, when he was 22 years old, he was arrested for rape and kidnapping. After some hours of questioning, Miranda confessed, signing a confession that said his conviction was voluntary. The police never told him, however, that he had a right to a lawyer or that he had a right to remain silent. At his trial, his lawyer objected to the evidence of his confession because it said it violated his right against self-incrimination. The judge let the jury see the confession and they convicted him. He was sentenced to 20 to 30 years in prison, and the Arizona Supreme Court upheld his conviction. After that, his lawyers asked the United States Supreme Court to review the case. They said he had been deprived of his constitutional right not to incriminate himself. In a 5-4 decision in 1966, the court agreed with him, said that a suspect in custody, and these are the rights that you've heard about on TV when they read the Miranda rights, the right to remain silent. Anything you say will be used against you in court. You got to be clearly informed that you have the right to consult with a lawyer and to have a lawyer with you during the questioning, and that if you cannot afford a lawyer will be provided to represent you. After this decision, police departments around the country gave their officers Miranda cards so they could read suspects their rights. So what about Ernesto Miranda himself? What happened to him? Well, when his case came back down to the Arizona courts, he was retried, without the confession, of course. But his girlfriend testified against him, and he was convicted again and sentenced again to 20 to 30 years in prison. He was paroled in 1972. After his parole, he autographed Miranda cards, which he sold in bars for $1.50 apiece. He went back to prison for a year for a parole violation in the 1970s, and after he was paroled again, he had trouble staying out of trouble. He got into a fight in a bar in Phoenix in 1976, and he was stabbed to death. So Miranda's no longer with us, but his name lives on, of course, in legalese.
Legalese.